The Middle East is on fire, and the shockwaves are already hitting the entire globe. In this explainer, we are going to break down exactly what's happening, how we got here, and what could come next in the 2026 Iran war.
Okay, so let's get right into it. As of today, March 5th, 2026, we are 6 days into a full-blown war between a U.S.-Israeli coalition and Iran, and things are moving fast.
And the human cost, well, it's been staggering right from the get-go. We're already looking at estimates of over 1,200 people killed inside Iran. And that number, unfortunately, doesn't even count the casualties among civilians in Israel or U.S. troops in the region, which are also climbing.
The economy felt this almost instantly. This number shows the jump in the price of Brent crude oil. Why? Because one of the most critical arteries for global energy, the Strait of Hormuz, was basically shut down overnight.
And you know what happens when markets get scared? They run for safety. This is the new all-time record high for a single ounce of gold. Investors are dumping risky assets and scrambling for anything that feels solid.
So how did this all kick off on February 28th? Well, let's be clear, this was no small skirmish. This was a massive, overwhelming opening punch.
The whole thing started with Operation Epic Fury. This was a huge, coordinated air assault by the U.S. and Israel. And their stated goals were about as ambitious as it gets: regime change and the permanent destruction of Iran's nuclear program. They were targeting everyone from the supreme leader down to military bases and nuclear sites across the country.
And Iran's response? They didn't waste a second. They called it Operation True Promise IV, and it was huge. They didn't just fire back at Israel. They launched a massive wave of missiles and drones at 27 different U.S. military bases and allied countries all across the Gulf.
So you have to ask, right? A war this big doesn't just happen overnight. It's really the explosive finale to years of rising tension, proxy fights, and broken diplomacy. So how on earth did we get here?
This timeline really tells the story of that 2-year downward spiral. You can trace it all the way back to the conflict that erupted around Gaza in late 2023. Fast forward to mid-2025, and you had a short, sharp war that did real damage to Iran's nuclear program. Then Iran was hit with massive internal protests, weakening the regime. So, when one last attempt at diplomacy failed in February, the whole thing was just a powder keg waiting for a spark.
Okay, so let's talk about the fallout, because it's happening right now, and it's hitting everywhere, from the front lines of the conflict to your own wallet.
This is what's really just mind-boggling: the speed. In less than a week, Iran's conventional military has been absolutely hammered. I mean, look at this table. Its Navy and Air Force have been decimated, and a huge chunk of its mobile missile launchers are gone. That severely limits their ability to launch any kind of major conventional counterattack.
So, this brings us to a really crucial idea: Iran's entire game plan. It's called asymmetric endurance. See, they know they can't win a straight-up fight. So the whole strategy is to just survive that first massive punch. They do that by hiding their most important weapons, like missiles, deep underground in these missile cities. The goal is to make sure they can still hit back after being hit. And from there, they use their proxy armies and their chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz to just slowly bleed their enemies, making the war as painful and expensive as possible.
And this is how they make you feel the pain, economically. The Strait of Hormuz is their biggest weapon. About 20% of the entire world's oil supply passes through that little waterway. By threatening it, Iran can send oil prices through the roof. You can see the jump right here on the chart, and a lot of experts think we're going to see prices over $100 a barrel if this keeps up.
And those economic shockwaves are rippling through markets all over the world. Yeah, the U.S. market is down, but the real pain is being felt in countries that are totally dependent on imported energy. Look at South Korea. They import basically all of their oil. Their stock market just had its worst crash since the 2008 financial crisis.
So with the fighting in full swing, countries are being forced to pick a side. It's redrawing the geopolitical map right before our eyes, and the new lines are getting pretty tense.
Okay, so this chart lays it all out pretty clearly, right? You've got the U.S. and Israel, backed up by allies like the U.K. and France. You've got the Gulf states, literally caught in the middle. But what's really important here is the position of Russia and China. They're condemning the attacks, for sure, but they haven't offered any real military help to Iran.
And this quote from a leading expert just hits the nail on the head. It really captures how big of a deal this is. A lot of analysts are saying this war is a turning point. It's basically the death of the whole era of trying to use diplomacy and nuclear deals to contain Iran.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. You've got Russia and China both condemning the attacks, but their actual situations? Totally different. Russia is still completely bogged down in Ukraine, and now it's watching a critical trade route that runs through Iran just fall apart. China, on the other hand, is probably seeing a strategic opening here. A weaker, more isolated Iran is an Iran that's going to be much more dependent on Beijing down the road.
So this brings us to the biggest question of all, the one everyone is asking. Where does this go from here? How does this end? The answer is going to define the Middle East, and maybe the world, for a long, long time.
So how are the experts trying to figure this out? They're watching a few key signals. You have political statements predicting a war that lasts weeks, not years. But maybe the most telling signal is a military one. Iran's ability to launch missiles has already plummeted by an incredible 86%. That suggests they just can't sustain this kind of high-intensity fight for very long.
So based on everything we know right now, intelligence experts are looking at 4 main ways this could play out. Now, a quick collapse or a huge regional war are still possible, but they're less likely. The most probable outcome, sitting at about a 45 to 50% chance, is what they're calling controlled degradation. Basically, a 3 to 6 week conflict where U.S. and Israeli forces systematically dismantle Iran's military and nuclear capability, which is then followed by some kind of negotiated pause.
But, once the fighting stops, that's really just the beginning. The long-term impacts, they are huge. We could be looking at a world where the energy map is completely redrawn. A new nuclear arms race could kick off in the Middle East as other countries get nervous. And there's the very real, very dangerous possibility of Iran, a country of 88 million people, becoming a massive failed state.
Look, at the end of the day, this is so much more than just a regional war. What we're watching is a forceful reassertion of American military power. And it's a huge blow to the whole idea of a multipolar world that Russia and China have been pushing. The global power structure is literally being rewritten as we speak. And the big question is, what is this new chapter going to look like for all of us?